Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm going to talk about government policies with specific focus on supply management. Now, my view is only one perspective of supply management. You're more apt to go out to the C.D. Howe Institute or do a Google search and say Canada Supply Management System to get an idea in terms of what it means and what's its cost to the economy and what the pieces are to it. I'm going to give you an overview of it to provide you what drives it, provides what it impacts the consumer, and also talk about issues if we decide to go to a different direction. A little bit brief bio about myself. I'm CPA CGA by trade. I focus on getting information out, and I really look at analyzing government policies to look at what can be done to improve things going forward. Now, I'll talk about supply management issues. I will talk about agricultural subsidies. I'll talk about federal government programs, and I'll talk about dismantling. So this chart here, just quickly in a nutshell, shows you retail pricing. So when you go to a grocery store, retail pricing, what you pay for, is set in a multitude of ways. One is the cost itself, is what basically is the rate that we charge farmers based on the marketing boards. Then what we mark it up is based on competitive pricing. So some of the pricing you're seeing, depending on where we goods, because we do import a certain amount of goods. When you start talking about grapes, bananas, we get them from foreign jurisdictions. But when we get into beef, chicken, pork, a lot of that comes from our own processing plants in Canada, so it's something to bear in mind. The other key point is that most budgets in Canada, household family budgets, 14% of their budget is food. So you're talking about $8,100 annually is spent on food. So you're looking like $650 per month is spent on food. Now, what is Canada Supply? Well, what it really is each sector, and the agricultural sectors across the country has what we call the marketing boards. The role of those marketing boards are to sit there to work with the farmers, the agricultural sector, to set up quotas, to look at volume, to set the rules of engagement out. So really what they are is they're a middle group to set pricing, to set volume, and that's where we get into quota, and they basically handle that sector. So their middle level management put into play as part of managing the supply management through Canada. Okay, what's the problem with it? Well, these groups work together and they set quota. So if I'm a farmer who wants to expand my business and get more quota as part of leveraging my business, it's very difficult to expand quota. Second point is new entrants coming into the market are very difficult and very costly, because when you start looking at this, you're starting to look at programs to support that in terms of getting people to come into small business or small farmers are transitioning is a lot of money. The control of supply. If you control supply, that means you can also impact pricing, and that can also force up the cost of consumer goods like food in this particular case. The other thing is you can't talk about the farming sector unless you talk about agricultural sectors around the world. It's always been a contentious issue because most countries have some sort of subsidies. You may determine those subsidies different ways, but most governments around the world support their agriculture through different types of programs, and that's what I like to call. And what those programs do, they help the farmers. So Canada's case, to help its sector, what it does is it imposes tariffs on imports to kind of make sure that those goods aren't coming at a lower price versus what's going in, what we grow or produce here in the country. We restrict imports in certain sectors because if we have a strong dairy sector or strong beef pork sector, we want to make sure we protect those industries. And that's what you're seeing here with this chart that kind of shows you a lot of the countries where they actually do a lot more subsidies in terms of the annual growth rate compared to other countries. This is just quickly to show you Canada programs. So there's different programs at a federal level that provide loans or some sort of income supplement. Now, it's nice to talk about dismantling supply management. And realistically what we're saying is let's remove all these marketing boards and get rid of them. Okay, now you got a farmer sitting here. He's growing wheat. He's producing milk. Okay, how is he going to negotiate with those suppliers as part of getting his product to market? How do you do that? Well, somehow you're going to have somebody involved to help that facilitate that. Okay, whether that means corporations are created as part of doing that, something has to happen as part of that flow. That's one of the key factors. The second point is, if you start bringing more, changing your policies around tariffs, reducing them, then you have to look at how those tariffs impact your sector. So there has to be some transitioning funds come into play for farmers. Next key point is you have to look at is the small farm plays a key role in local rural economies. And what do I mean by that? Go take a look at southern Ontario. Go take a look at the Ottawa Valley. Go take eastern townships in Quebec. Go through New Brunswick. Go to Nova Scotia. Go to PEI. Go anywhere. When you go to these small towns that are about 2,000, 3,000 people, the ag sector is a big part of that. If that ag sector isn't growing, they're not spending money in the local communities. Those local communities would die. And that's something to bear in mind. Canada has a solid ag sector. Why? Because we have arable land. How do we do better jobs in? We have to look at the programs to maximize that, the support from technology, better farming practices around expert farming to help better get more use of the land. And we also need trade agreements in so that we can expand or export our goods to market. That has to be part of the overall supply management solution. We do have programs in play where Export Development Corporation could come into play as part of this overall policy in terms of how do we support exports and how do we support local buying patterns. And that's where we get work with the grocery store chains to kind of manage that. That's something to bear in mind. There also has to be protection for dumping of agricultural products from other countries to make sure that they're not coming in at a lower cost than what we cost to produce it. So we want protection in there. Then you have to look at overall other policies. So it's easy to say I'll dismantle supply management, but if I do not put the competitive conditions there for farmers, like looking at cap and trade policies, looking at WSIB policies, looking at other taxation policies from corporate to personal taxes, then I'm going to set myself up for some problems to be competitive. If I don't reduce interprovincial trade barriers, then I'm reducing the ability for those goods to flow across the country to keep competitive. If I make rules so hard on farmers from the water or land usage or any sort of environmental condition, that has cost. So it's easy to say I'll dismantle supply management, but I have to look at all angles of policies from the marketing boards to support for exports, to look at government policies around hydro rates, other type of policies, so that as you're doing it, the farmer has a chance to be competitive. So just reducing one side of it doesn't look at all angles of policy. In a lot of cases what government officials do is they look at one angle. One angle doesn't solve anything. You have to look at multiple angles. And that's what this presentation discussed. Is yes, maybe we should be looking at the way we better do it. Maybe we can eliminate some of these marketing boards. But what is the option and the opportunities to go to the next level to manage the supply in Canada? And that's something that needs to be discussed. And it shouldn't be discussed by just one person saying let's dismantle something. You have to have an alternative, and you have to have a process that makes it better so that at the end of the day the household consumer benefits from lower price, he gets the goods he wants, and we don't have issues with supply. Thank you.